It's hard for LLMs to choose an item from a very long list of options. They tend to give more weight to the beginning and the end of the list, and sometimes they hallucinate items that are not in the list. This can be solved with a RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation Agent Flow. So we have an LLM create a search query that is used in a vector database to find the most relevant items based on similarity search. Those most relevant items are the only ones that are considered when choosing an item. So we're basically using RAG to narrow down the list of options to make it easier for the decider LLM to choose. In this example, I created an agent workflow that, given a video game situation, it chooses one option from a list of all items in the game to have as loot. So there are about 100 items from a fake video game, and we're going to store these in the vector database so we can run a similarity search on them to help narrow down the results for the final AI call that will choose them. So here we're setting up a new vector database in Pinecone, which is a cloud-based vector DB. And after we set it up, we will vectorize all of our items and then upsert them. So first we give each item an ID and set its text property to be the stringified version of all of its properties. And then we'll use an embeddings model to assign a vector to each item's text, and then we'll add all those vectors to the database. All right, so here I am in Pinecone, and we've got no indexes yet, so let's run the script to create one and add all the vectors. So I'm on localhost, and I'm going to my setup Pinecone, and let's look at the console. I'll run initialize, and I'll refresh Pinecone. And now we have this items that just got created, and we have no records in it. So let's go ahead and upsert all of our data. So again, this is kind of creating a vector for each item and then putting them into Pinecone. So I'll refresh again. And there you go. We've got all of our vectors. Let's look at the first one, ID 0. And yep, our text, demonic elixir. It's got all of the properties in it. It's got its IDs. Here are its vector values too. So now let's try it out. Vector search. So I'll search for, I don't know, healing item. And it returned the top 5 most relevant items. Again, it vectorizes our query search and then finds the most similar vectors of the vectorized in-game items and then returns the most similar ones. So healing belt, healing spear, health potion, wind health potion. These, seem like a pretty good response to healing item. Here's the code that we use to query Pinecone. So first we take our search query, which was just healing item, and then we create a vector out of those words. Then we use Pinecone to give us the top 5 vectors that are closest to that query vector, and we return those items. All right, now let's put it all together in an agent flow. So first I'll show you the flow in action, and then we will go into the code. In a production flow, all of these steps would be done immediately, one after the other, but since we're demoing, we're pausing at each step to look at the output. So just to get started, we have the AI come up with an in-game situation that our RAG flow will have to choose an item for. So we're in some forgotten ruins of an ancient dwarven fortress. And then we use our situation to create a search term for our Pinecone query. Okay, so here's what it's going to use to search Pinecone, dwarven fortress, gargoyle, this kind of thing. And Then we will query Pinecone like we just did before. It's going to return the top 5 most similar items, so ancient ring, light amulet, mystic ring, that kind of thing. And finally, we will give an LLM the in-game situation that we came up with at the top, along with our top 5 options, and it will decide which item is the best fit just from those top 5. So this is an improvement on trying to feed in all 100 of the items. And so it chose Mystic Ring of the Forgotten Ruins, and since we are in some Forgotten Ruins, that makes sense. All right, now let's look at the code that the agent flow we just looked at is using. So first we generate a situation, and this is just a simple LLM call. If you're curious about these abstractions that I'm using to make the AI calls, feel free to reference my previous video on how I like to architect LLM-based web apps. Next, we are generating our item query. So we tell the AI that it will be given an in-game situation and that it needs to come up with search terms. And so we pass in the situation and we get back a query. Then we use those search terms to query Pinecone. This is the same code we went over before. It vectorizes our query and then uses Pinecone to return the top 5 most similar items. And the last thing we do is we take our query result, which are the top 5 most similar items in the query, and we give those along with the in-game situation for the AI to choose. To limit hallucinations and type errors, it's easier for the AI to return just the item ID, and then we search for our item list for that ID and return it. Alright, so that's how you make an LLM choose from a long list. I have linked the open source repo and blog post on the topic in the description, and thank you for your time.